Come in, welcome. What's that? No, you haven't missed anything. They're just about to start. Buffalo sports, of course. Everything. Bills, Sabres, Buttes, No, it's not very... Well, they certainly think they're funny. Listen, let me pour you a drink. Have a seat and lend an ear. You'll hear tales of sorrow and despair, endless droughts and infamous tanks, and things Mike doesn't like. Please, join us.
Let's talk about something that depresses me way less than the Buffalo Sabres. And if you're looking for the best team or the hottest team in Buffalo sports right now, I think a solid contender also plays at the KeyBank Center. The Buffalo Bandits coming in like a house of fire, coming in off a win against Western, leading Calgary 12-10 on Saturday night. And a game that, Steve, we talked about it off microphone earlier, one of the better games we've seen in that building of late, in a game that they had to earn the victory, but the resolve of the team was tested, and they came through in flying colors.
It's funny because I was standing outside the coach's room, and Rusty Kruger, the assistant coach, came out, and he gave me a whew, like, whoa. I'm like, entertainment value? That game was outstanding. And that was a revelation for him, because his whole night was spent behind the bench shitting a brick, not because it was so intense. To be clear, the Bandits did not lead until 10-9, so they were playing catch-up the whole game. They went down 2-0 on Calgary's first shots, but it was interesting to talk to players and coaches after the game and watch them when you talked about how entertaining it was from a fan's perspective, because for them it was stressful, and that's okay, because this is the kind of win that builds the character. This is the kind of close games you're going to get into the playoffs. All the cliches, but they're true. This is the kind of game you played against a good team, against a really good goaltender. You came from behind, and ultimately you flexed your muscle, and you won a big game.
All right, and you mentioned something too that was said, is that feels like the game that over the last couple seasons, that Bandits team getting off to that start, they're down 4 or 5-0 early on in that game before they start to turn it around. They did not allow themselves to dig that kind of hole, and part of it is what appears to be a team that really bonds together and came through. The defense, I love how the defense and Vino talk after every goal, and they stand there and they watch them, the gentleman trying to like, all right, here's what we'll do again. And they just never seem to panic. It seems like in the past they would start to panic, and there was no panic at all on that bench on Saturday.
Well, ironically, after the 2 goals they gave up early, defense and tranny is what brought them back into the game. No forward had more than 4 points for Buffalo. No player did, but Priola with 2 huge goals, McKay contributing. Overall, it wasn't the offense, the high-powered offense that won them the game. So, yeah, defensively they had some lapses. You mentioned how frustrated Vino was. Vince was really mad after those first 2 goals went in. Neither one was a very good goal, and it just kind of felt deflated in there. You know, fans are all amped up, and all of a sudden it's 2-0 on the first 2 shots, but that wasn't the tale of the rest of the game. They didn't go down 4 or 5-0. And ultimately, I said, they didn't play well. And there's been a couple times this year where they didn't play well. They're just so talented from top to bottom. They now have the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th overall picks from this last year's draft. But they are so talented. And in any sport, if you have enough talent, it can cover a multitude of issues, and that's kind of what's been happening for them.
And this is an offense that's been playing without Josh Byrne now for a more extended period of time, and they are still finding ways to create that offense, even though it feels like they're very heavy on the left side. There's just enough with whether it's Dane or Frazier or Durston or Evans, like all these guys are just, there's so much creativity on the offense, and you kind of feel the influences that John Tavares has had on the creation of this offense, running those 6-man plays, getting Vins off the floor and back on to run an extra player to set the play. Yep. Running Dane on top instead of fully on the left side to create different angles and plays. Using Hogarth and Frazier to the front of the net, letting Durston kind of work down below the goal line. And they just seem to throw so much at opposing defenses and goaltending that their defense and goaltending does enough to eventually the levee breaks and the goals start going in. And when they start doing, and that offense gets rolling, there hasn't been a team since that Toronto game that started the home season that anyone has been able to keep up with them in that building.
Yeah, you mentioned Frazier, and he's the one I think about right now. That shorthanded goal. So the Bandits were shorthanded for 5 minutes, and I believe it was on the major that this happened. And they did give up one, but that's not a big deal on a major. But Frazier just ripped a shot from the restraining line, and Christian Del Bianco is no slouch. He's 21 years old, just went first overall in the WLA draft. Strange for that to be a goaltender, but he goes to his hometown team. This kid is legit. He is phenomenal. I mean, you think about the guys that he beat out for a job, than Chiliano, who was, the second coming behind Poulan in Calgary, regardless. This guy is unbelievable, and they beat him. They found ways to score. Interestingly enough, you talked about the creativity of the offense, and for the season, that has 100% been true. This past game, Coach Tavares said he knew where shots were coming from. He was disappointed. He said it was 1-2 pass offense, and he said, I could predict who was going to take the shot. And when I can predict it, so can they. But that didn't matter because they scored in transition, or they scored on the power play, or they did score on offensive sets. But throughout the year, you are right. The offense the ball's been hot. Corey Small in the quick stick, or Durston with some crazy move between a couple defenders. Dane Smith doing the shimmy shake. They've been finding really creative ways to score. But what a testament for a team that finished last in the last 2 years, because they would get down and they get behind, and then that was that. All of a sudden, that if you needed evidence that they're not the same team, there it was on Saturday.
I remember being in the building for a game, I believe it was 2 seasons ago, when Calgary came in and we went up big on them early, and then Calgary came back in that game and won in our building, and that just felt deflating, and it felt so good to be on the other side of that game. And I know the offense, you talk about the transition, the defense being so key in that game. Two things. Who knew that Steve Priolo had that move in his bag of tricks to score that beautiful backhand SportsCenter top 10 goal for his second of the night? And the moment that changed the game, I think, irreversibly, was the shot by Calgary that went off the goalpost and came back to midfield that eventually led to the goal by O'Connor, who's coming on really nicely as the season's gone on. And him and McKay being so key in that game, and just kind of giving that extra little spark of creativity to an offense that Tavares would say didn't have it to the degree he wanted.
I think part of it, this team has, the game has changed. We've always said that there's kind of two ways to play defense in the NLL. You either pack it in and don't give up the middle and keep everything outside, or you play aggressive and try to get out the other way. And for a long time, Buffalo packed it in. They won championships that way. That was kind of a Kilgore kind of thing. That was Cordingley's kind of thing. And then they made the switch to try to get out and run. And you look at Joey Cupido, you look at Graham Hossack and Brett Gillies, and you got guys that can get up and go. Brad Self, and they kind of revolutionized the game a bit, that make transition such a big part of the game. And Buffalo, I think, was trying to do that without the personnel to do so. And now it's funny when you get the 3rd and 4th overall pick, who are both stud athletes. Gilray is 6'4" and runs like the wind. Maybe taller. If I discounted you a couple inches, I'm sorry, Matt. And McKay has such an offensive talent. They actually ran him out the front door on purpose in games that Burden didn't play before Cloutier came in. Also worth noting that, Cloutier, the 2nd overall pick, is now a Bandit. But yeah, they now have the personnel to execute the defensive scheme they've wanted to for a long time. And it's really, really good to see them. They play very sound defensively, and then when they get the ball, look out, because it's coming, and it's coming fast.
Sound defensively to the point that they can trade a defenseman for Cloutier and feel comfortable that the remaining personnel in Priolo, Brownell, Weiss, Desnew, those guys are going to hold the fort down, and they did. They got behind in the game, but only allowed 2 goals in the second half to Calgary, which allowed them to finally make that comeback, take the lead 10-9, and then eventually take out that 12-10 victory. It was not easy. Calgary was moving the ball extraordinarily well, making the move side to side, creating open space, making Vino's life very difficult. But the defense, they went back into the locker room, and they were ready, and they were game for what Calgary was bringing to them. And they seemed to come out more physical, shut down Dixon, and do what they had to do.
They did their best on Dixon. Steve Priolo is one of the best defenders in the league, and Dixon put him in the washer. He's so good. But I thought Vince, after those first 2 goals, absolutely slammed the door. There were so many point-blank saves that he had to make, and that's saves that they weren't necessarily getting, and it's nothing against Bouquet or Cosmo or any of these guys. Bouquet's having a great year in New England. Cosmo's one of the best goaltenders to ever play, but Vince is giving them that save. time and time again that's what you brought him in for. That's what you're hoping for. And, it's frustrating because there's times that he doesn't give them that save and fans get mad. People get mad. It's like you need to open up your eyes and realize that, that shot came from right in front of him. And if you want him to save it, fine, but I'm not going to die on that hill. But he's been unbelievable. And Saturday, to transition now, Saturday's a huge win to build off of as they had to face Rochester on Friday. A building that there's something, this is not the correct number, 11-24 all time in the Blue Cross Arena, 11-21, 11-22.
Well, I've got a different number, not the Blue Cross specific number. They are 28-40 all time against the Nighthawks in total.
Yeah.
And then, I think 11-24 roughly, give or take.
1-4 in the playoffs, I'm sure
on
of
the
that.
road.
Yeah.
And it just feels like they're so snake bit. We've seen a lot of the best at times, worst at times against Rochester this season. They had the home game where they just, for 60 minutes, absolutely dominated the Nighthawks at KeyBank Center. And that game was as impressive of a victory as I've ever seen in the sport of box lacrosse by a team over another team in terms of just controlling the game from the
then what happened in the rematch in Rochester?
It was not as pretty.
It's exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
It was one of the most handy beatdowns, one of the best games, but it was on the other side. Austin Shanks goes for 6, 5, 6, a lot.
It's like as soon as they walk into that building, it's everything. The records just go completely out the door.
It's funny to watch, like, when I bring it up to Richie, because Richie obviously played and now coached for a very long time. And you bring it up to him, I'm like, the demons of the Blue Cross Arena. And he gets this look in his eyes, like just this glass over look. Like, he's like, if I knew what the reason was, we wouldn't be 11-24 there. Like, there are very literal demons in that Blue Cross Arena for a lot of teams, not just Buffalo. Rochester has always played well there. I don't know if it's the smaller rink. I don't know if it's the turf. I don't know if it's the building. But Buffalo has always struggled there, and now they travel there Friday. And they can't rest on their laurels. Sure, they're in first place, but Toronto's right on their heels.
Yeah, and Toronto, and they did get a little help with Georgia losing to Colorado over the weekend, but there's 3 teams at the top of the East that are just nipping at each other's heels, and you give those teams an inch, they're going to take a mile. I mean, Toronto already had one big victory in Buffalo this year. Georgia's no slouch. There's no weekends off in this conference at all, and beating Calgary is a good step. It's a great step to building this record and building yourselves back towards the playoffs. But the journey doesn't end here. There's still plenty of time left and a lot of games against those top teams in the East that remain for the Bandits before this regular season is concluded.
And no first-round bye because 4 teams are going to make the playoffs this year. Last year, first-round bye because 3 teams made the playoffs. But I know the league parity is real, but if you have to play in the first round, the 4 seed, which is either looking like it's going to be like New England or Rochester, or you have to play Toronto,
that's a whole different
what's
world.
your choice? Or Georgia for that matter, because Georgia won the Cup 2 years ago and is really, if you had to pick your pathway, get that 1 seed and then either play Rochester at home or New England, who for a bit looked pretty legit when they beat Saskatchewan and Georgia in back-to-back weeks, but have since come down to earth. But that first seed in the East, I think, is going to be really important because as much parity as there is in the league,
it does feel like there's a different.
You do not want to play
3 and
Toronto
4 this year.
Correct. You do not want to play Toronto or Georgia in the first round of the playoffs.
So big game for the Bandits Friday, trying to go to 9-2
Unreal.
After the last couple seasons.
They had 8
feels
wins combined over the last 2 years or something.
Such strides taken by the new coaching staff, and credit where it's due, and the new players coming in. But another big game. They aren't home for a couple weeks, which is sad.
They come back home March 9th.
Yeah, March 9th
they're
home game.
And then they're home again the 23rd and the 30th. Does that sound right?
So the 9th against the Swarm, the 23rd against Toronto, and the 20th of April against the Black Wolves. So all conference games left at home this season.
Yep.
At least until the playoffs.
But that means 5 games on the road, which is not going to be anything easy to do. But it starts with the big one in Roch on Friday that they'll want to pick up another big 2 points on, and been fun. It's been there's been bigger crowds. Like the fans are still kind of they're starting to grab the attention of people. They're rightfully so.
The building felt much more alive on Saturday in the crowd than it has the entire season.
Yeah, part of it was the game and part of it was the attendance. But the other reality is they need the coverage. They need people talking about them, and that's what we're doing here because they are playing well and they are a big part of the Buffalo sports scene. And putting the tongue in the cheek a little bit, there's some people upset that the Bandits were on page 11 of Sunday's newspaper, a small column on page 11 of our hometown newspaper, that they were given virtually no attention for being in first place and playing very well.
So part of our slightly later New Year's resolutions here at the podcast is to dedicate more time to the Bandits because we have a lot of people in this room who are season ticket holders, writers, broadcasters for the team. and want to use this as a channel. So if you enjoyed the segment, let us know. Be happy to hear you. Take your comments and suggestions for future Bandit segments, but this is something we plan to keep as a staple of this program moving forward. So,
Gonna plug, I'll be on the radio Friday. Listen in.
Follow along to Steve. We'll be
doing color this Friday. So
doing the official radio color broadcast.
On what station?
I'm checking. 1520 a.m. Now the problem
1520 sounds right.
It's been changing, so that's part of the problem. But I'm looking it up right now. So sometimes it's 5:50, sometimes it's 9:30, sometimes it's 15:20.
Friday, depending on if there's another event, something else going on there.
You threw me for a whole loop. What a bum.
That's my bad.
I should know this, and I'm ashamed that I don't. But I'm looking it up right now. I probably had it right. I did. It's on ESPN 1520, just like I said all along.
Excellent.
Never a doubt.
Well, check Steve out. The game on Friday, AM 1520.
Yeah.
The right side of the dial. It's pretty right, isn't it? 1520. It's
pretty far.
There's not much more AM to go around. So, Hey Justin, should we wrap this thing up? Let's wrap it up.
One last quick thing to find this week before you do. Final Buffalo Beats home game of the regular season is this Saturday against the Boston Pride. We hope to see you all there, and if you can't be there, you can tune in to the official NWHL live feed that will feature myself and good friend and occasional podcast contributor Eric Wolschlager on commentary, and we will be happy to bring you along for the ride wherever you are in the hockey universe. Anything else, gentlemen, to throw in before we put a nice bow on this one?
Nope.
I'll take that as a resounding no. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back here next Monday recapping Sabres trade deadline, Bandits at Rochester, Buttes at Pride. See you soon.